whoever they are. So here's the question to contemplate. The sadhana, like all sadhanas, presents a roadmap between where you are, so let's call that samsara or confusion, and complete enlightenment. So it's a map between where you are and complete enlightenment. So the first question I want to ask is, who or what kind of being do you want to be on the road? So you're on a road between where you are and complete enlightenment. Who or what kind of being do you want to be? I'm going to repeat the question because there's some people just coming in, which gives you guys some time to think about it. Putting here. So the first part of the question is the sadhana presents you with a framework of the map between where you are, let's call it samsara or confusion, to complete awakening. And the first question was, what kind of being or who do you want to be? The second half of the question is, as you travel the road, what kind of vehicle are you in? Or maybe you don't have a vehicle. Maybe you're on foot. Maybe you're crawling. You could have any mode of transportation you wish. So, what kind of vehicle? I'm going to resume the recording. So I think it's worth, as Trungpa Rinpoche once said, when you begin to talk about the Dharma, it's like combing your hair. You should begin at the front, right? So you always begin at the beginning, right? And I don't want to spend too much time doing this, but we begin by taking refuge and acknowledging that this world of struggle and everything else, that no one wins, and we're taking refuge in the example of the Buddha, his teachings, the Dharma, and the community of other meditators who try to embody those teachings. And so, living out the five promises as best we can is a good step towards that. And that helps cut through the sense of a solid self and takes you to more like a river than a rock, right? So you begin to get, oh, this is flowing. And then that's the foundation teachings. And we build on top of that foundation with the Great Way teachings of, well, not only am I not solid like a rock, but everything is flowing like a river, right? And so there are no rocks, right? And, the external phenomena, everything I experience, constantly flowing and changing, and everything else is, one would say, embedded, you might say caught, in this complex web of interconnections, of causes and effects and karma and everything else. And you look around, you go, everything else wants to be happy and struggles with suffering. And out of that sense of openness and compassion arises naturally. And so often the Great Way is characterized as teachings on emptiness, which I would like to call open, empty, full, and natural compassion. And so here we are discussing the immediate way, or the Vajrayana, the lightning fast way. And our question that we started with was, who are you, and what kind of being are you, and what kind of vehicle are you traveling this road on? And you can travel the road. The road goes from confusion to awake. That's the Dharma, right? And you have a choice of how far do you want to go, how fast do you want to go. There is no correct answer. There's only your answer. And everybody else's answer is their answer. So her or his answer. Everybody's allowed to have their own answer. Eventually, the road leads to full awakening, but is that a fast journey, an immediate journey, a relatively slow? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you walk or if you crawl or if you're sitting in the middle of the road waiting for it to come to you. Like they're all answers. The immediate way suggests that if you wanted to get to full awakening quickly, in order to fully take advantage of all of the interconnection, complex web in which we are embedded, and to be useful to people, to fully embody compassion, and to go with the flow rather than being like a rock, right? If you wanted to do that really quickly, well, there are ways that you can get there that are skillful and fast ways. And sadhana practice is one of those. Um, so a sadhana is basically spiritual training. These are what we've talked about for the last several weeks. We're training to be awake. We realize that whatever we say about awake are just words, but some words can be helpful pointers. Like the finger pointing at the moon. The moon is not the finger, but the finger can be helpful. It's up there. It's not down there. It's up there, right? So helpful pointers. And then the immediate way often uses in sadhanas use this form of, I was talking about it like telling a story with a heroic character. And that character makes the journey. And then you imagine yourself as that character. Right? So in this sadhana, the character is Dorje Trollo Karma Pakshi. Dorje Trollo is one of the titles or descriptions of Padmasambhava, the lotus born, the white lotus, right? A 7th century, 8th century Indian saint who is very important in the transfer of Buddhism from India to Tibet. And then Karma Pakshi is one of the names for the second in the line of the Karmapas. So 12th century Tibetan saint, right? And these two characters put together are Dorje Trollo Karma Pakshi. And we're imagining this combination. And we imagine it, and I'm going to put up the screen share for a second, because this is not, we're no longer, when you imagine this, you're no longer imagining your ordinary self. So my question of who do you want to be has in it the possibility that you could be somebody other than just you. Just me as Joe Schmo, going around my confused, samsaric, struggling with confusion existence. No, you could imagine yourself awake. And so this is one picture, and this is really just an artist rendering of one imagination of what awake might look like. Right, so here's the image of Dorje Trollo, So Dorje Trollo is red. He's fierce. He's supposed to be looking fierce. He has 3 eyes. It says they
Brian,
stare.
we don't see the image yet. We see
Oh
the
no,
taking refuge
you
practice.
don't. You see that one. Let's stop the share. Thank you for that. Let's go back to the share and see if, how about now? Okay, so there's Dorje Trollo. Always full of tricks. So red, right? So sort of blazing with the energy of compassion and connection. He's, has 3 eyes that are staring in all directions. He has fangs, his clenched teeth, right? He's sort of like grimacing. His name basically means destroyer of ego, right? So I was calling him the rock crusher, more like a river than a rock. He crushes the rock of ego. He obliterates it, right? So that's the ego, right? Um, and he's wearing the 3 robes of a monk. So this sort of red and gold patchwork robe is the outer robe of a monk. He's holding 2 weapons in his hands. This is a symbolic thunderbolt or vajra, and the other is a ritual 3-pointed dagger or purba. And the thing about the 3 points is it leaves a wound that doesn't heal. So he's going to penetrate ego in a way that ego cannot recover from. That's the point of the purba, right? And then he's riding the back of this tigress. And so inside of Indo-Tibetan Buddhism and Indo-Tibetan Tantra, there's always a union between the energy of the masculine, represented by Dorje Trullo here, and the feminine, represented by the tigress, right? So they're in balanced union, right? And, we've talked a lot about this image. So you're imagining yourself as this, and this is about where we left off in the sadhana the last time. So I'm going to close that. We can always come back to it. And I'm going to go to the sadhana itself. I think this is where we ended, right? His three eyes gaze into fathomless space. He has achieved the highest state of simplicity. Around Karma Pakshi. Um, so they're only using half of his name, Dorje Trullo Karma Pakshi. Around Karma Pakshi is a great host of the Buddhas and the Sangha, and together with the utterance of the Dharma that fills the sky. They are surrounded by the Dharmapalas and Dakinis, so all the gods and goddesses that are awake. The sound of hum and ah and pat shakes the sky. It is as though all the musical instruments of the universe were being played simultaneously. And then this is what I think I want to talk about today. It's the view. Like, if you are actually on your way to awakening, what does that look like? And these next lines open up a discussion of the view, and then it goes further as we go into the sadhana. Whatever you see as the form, and I'm going to substitute awake, the experience of awake, right? I'm going to do a loose translation of this. Whatever you see is how awake looks. Whatever you hear is how awake sounds. And whatever you think, that's awake. So what it says is, whatever you see as the form of Karma Pakshi run wild. Whatever you see is awake. Whatever you hear is the voice of Karma Pakshi let loose. The sounds you hear, that's the sound of awake. Whatever you think is the thought of Karma Pakshi unleashed. That's your thinking awake. In the spontaneously existing state where meditation is effortless, all movements are the Vajra dance, and all sound is the Vajra music. It is the great Guru Mandala. And that's where we ended last week's discussion. And so there's this profound suggestion that's being made, and it's the, I think, essence of the Vajrayana, or the immediate way, or Indo-Tibetan Buddhist Tantra, is that you regard yourself, or I regard myself, as confused. Here I am stuck in samsara. But that's really just a dream you're having. The ability to be awake is available right now. That's what makes it immediate. So whatever you see, that can be awake. Whatever you hear, that's the sound of awake. The thoughts, feelings, memories, emotions you're experiencing, those are the experiences of being awake. Right? Awake, awake, awake. Right? The river is flowing. Right? No rocks to be found. Right? That's the spontaneous way it is. That's just the way it is. You don't have to make an effort for that to happen. It's just awake, awake, awake. Right? That's the view. If you think you're not awake, you might be back at the foundation view, working to, try to dissolve the rock. Or you might be at the great way view, trying to dissolve what looks like the rocks of the phenomena. But this takes you to a different place. It's like you could already be awake. And we're trying to get from confused to awake. The sadhana is giving us that portal, or that doorway, that road to get there. It's like, oh. And then there's two things that happen in the next section, which is, I thought we'd go through this next section that starts, O Karmapa, Lord and knower of the three times, O Padmakara, Father and protector of all beings. One of the things that's very typical of Indo-Tibetan immediate way practice is that we use the way life presents itself, our ordinary, normal, day-to-day experience, and we use that to to catapult ourselves into being awake. Right? And so the way it feels, at least to me, is that I'm here in my home in Indian Harbor, in my version of confused existence, right? And I want to be awake. And so it's as if I'm asking something outside of me. And we use that, even though we know that in reality, that's just a dream. But it's a pretty compelling dream. You think you are where you're listening to this right now, and you think you're not enlightened. I mean, if you realize that you're already awake, you could stop listening. But if you're still working on the project, right, then there's some quality of like, oh, I want more. I want to connect deeper with this. And so there's a quality of supplication. And there's an understanding from the depth of the cultures, the Indo-Tibetan cultures, and actually our old cultures, right? Our old European and Western cultures. If you want something, look like you need it. Look like you deserve it. You really want it. You really need it. Imagine you're walking down the street and there are two panhandlers, and both are equally pitiable and equally attractive looking. So like you're not repelled, you don't want to look away because of something or other. But one of them is wearing a $5,000 suit and a Rolex and, really nice designer shoes. And the other has like patchy jeans and a sweater with the elbows worn out and they're shivering. And you have to give to one or the other. Well, I don't know. I think most people will give to the poor guy or woman who looks like they're cold rather than the one with the designer suit and the Rolex. Because the poor person who looks like they need it, it calls out more. And so this begins with, some sense of I'm asking and I really need your help. And so part of it's going to be like that. And then another part is going to be, and I'm worthy of helping. Like I know I could use it, I will make good use of it. And then a third part of what we're going to look at is, and if I get it, this is what I'll do. Here's where I'm going to go with it. Right? So we start with the supplication. Right? O Karmapa, Lord and knower of the three times, O Padmakara, Father and protector of all beings, you transcend all coming and going. Awake mind is always here. Right? Understanding this, I call upon you. And this is an older version. I think in the newer version, this has been updated. So I'll try to do this as I go through. Give thought to your only child. I am a credulous and helpless animal who has been fooled by the mirage of duality. And if you think that's not true, then ask yourself, are you separate from the computer you're looking at, or the house that you're in, or everybody else that you can think of? Like, if you think that they're two and not all part of one connected web, then you probably are believing in duality. The more real you think you are, the more fooled by duality you've been. I have been fool enough to think that I possess my own projections. There's two levels here. The first projection is, I'm real. I am, fill in your name, and then we believe that. Like, I am Brian. Actually, Brian's an alias. Maybe I could use my given name. I am Bernard. Oh, that's just a name somebody gave me. I am, right? And we think, oh, we're real. Of course we're real, right? I'm an identical twin. I'm not you. Looking at my twin. We believe that. I'm not you. That's a rock. And we've been looking at more like a river than a rock, right? But we believe my rockness, right? Which is why we're calling on the rock crusher, Dorje Trollo, right? The second projection is, I believe my stories about you. And so when I think of people I've fallen in love with, or people I've fallen into hate with, people I've been angry at, people who I've been kind to, and I have a story about each one of them, and then I believe the story. It's even worse when the story is accurate, because that makes it easier to believe and harder to let go of. And we forget it's all just a story. I'm going to repeat that. It's all just a story. It's a
What,
projection.
what do you mean by accurate then?
Well,
Um,
I told a story last week about being wrongly dismissed from a job where they violated my contract. And easy to be angry because there was a fact, but that was just a story. There are lots of ways to look at that, right? And you think of somebody who's hurt you or somebody you've fallen in love with, but the hurt one makes it easier to talk about. So think of somebody who's done something. Thank you for the question. You think of somebody who's done something that was hurtful or rude or ignorant, and even if that was so, right? Then we build up a story of you meant this and you said that and I did this and here's how that connects to everything that happened before, and it gets bigger and bigger. Instead of at the moment that rude thing happened, I felt uncomfortable or embarrassed or hurt, and that was a moment that flowed by that is no longer here. All right. So we hold on to the rock and we build rocks around it. Right. Is that helpful, Evelyn? Okay. So I've been fool enough to think that I possess my own projection. So you and the character here is masculine in its form, so it's going to say father. In other tantras, it's mother, right? So this is just Dorje Trollo Karma Pakshi. It's two male imaginings, right? I have been fooled. So now you, my father, are my only refuge. You alone can grasp the Buddha state. The glorious copper-colored mountain is within my heart. Is not this pure, all-pervading, naked mind your dwelling place? So the idea of that is the possibility of awakening. There's so much you could say about it. You could go on for like hours about the copper colored mountain and in your heart and pure and all pervading. The possibility of being awake exists within your heart, or the core of your being. It's not the organ of the heart, but the core of your being, right? And that could open up, right? That's where this awake mind blossoms from. And then here's the part where you want to look like you really need it. Although I live in the slime and muck of the dark age, I still aspire to see that awake mind. Although I stumble in the thick black fog of materialism, I still aspire to see it. Like, help me. I really need your help. And then back to another description of awake. The joy of spontaneous awareness, which is with me all the time. Is not this your face, O Karma Padmakara, the being this is what awake looks like, right? Although I live in the slime and muck of the dark age, I still aspire to see it. I really need this. Although I stumble in the thick black fog of materialism, I still aspire to see it. I'll say something about the dark age. It's a metaphor that's used a lot in immediate way Buddhism. Um, what makes a dark age is the feeling that it's impossible to awaken. It's harder to trust in the goodness of others. We're just caught in our rock-like fortress of ego. And so we think that our technology is the answer or ideas are the answer, and we forget that the answer is in the heart and the opening of the heart. So that's, not a bad description of where we are, right? Technology is easy, connection with others from a place of goodness becomes more challenging. right? The next one, right? Uh, in the story of Padmasambhava, this manifestation of him as Dorje Trollo takes place at this place called the Tiger's Cave. Uh, so tak is tiger in Tibetan, and sang is ground, right? So it takes a glorious tak song in the cave, which can accommodate everything. So we're talking about a place in the mythical story of Padmasambhava, but we're also talking about our life. Like your life, anything can happen in your life. Samsara and nirvana, open heart and mean heart, right? Hope and fear, which steals away your sense of awake, which is why they're called the heretics and bandits, right? A glorious taksang in the cave, which can accommodate everything, samsara and nirvana both. The heretics and bandits of hope and fear are subdued. So he's cutting through that, crushing that, and all experiences are transformed into crazy wisdom. I think crazy wisdom is one of the more misunderstood terms in this sadhana. What makes it crazy is that it goes beyond the reference point of good and bad, me and you, socially acceptable or socially disapproved, um, God and the devil, success and failure, pleasure and pain, all of those reference points that are the way that we structure our experience in samsara, this has gone outside of. But it hasn't gone outside of it into a wild, crazy, hurtful place. It's gone outside of it in a way that's beyond those reference points. It's just awake for awake's sake. And since awake is built on emptiness and compassion and letting go of the rock, it's an awake for awake's sake that doesn't have ego, that understands openness, and that practices compassion. Right? An equally good translation of the Tibetan, and I'm drawing a blank on the Tibetan at the moment, but an equally good translation is wisdom shook loose from its constraints. Right? So if you think about, we take the five promises of, not stealing, not killing, not lying. This is so far beyond that. It's like, why would I lie? The truth is natural, and I can be skillful with it. Why would I steal? The whole world is awake for me. I don't need to steal stuff. I can be generous, right? So it's like, it's beyond the constraint of do this, don't do that. It's just naturally there, right? Is not this your doing, O Dorje Trollo? And then again, I really need it. Although I live in the slime and muck of the dark age, I still aspire to see your face. I'm going to say something about the thick black fog of materialism. Although I stumble in the thick black fog of materialism, I still aspire to see your face. I really need this. So we talked about, okay, there's the dark age, and the materialism is more like what's happening inside of me. Like I think more stuff, a better ego, self improvement, right? Some kind of spiritual badge will help me. That's materialistic. That's acting as if awake isn't already there, right? It's turning it into stuff. And so we do. We study all kinds of things and we think the next idea will set me free when the idea of freedom has already been placed in our hands. Or the next practice will be the answer when we already have hundreds of practices that are completely the answer. Or we think the next time I feel this emotion, I'll be okay. It's like, well, you could be okay right now, right? It's like there's a next time stuff quality to materialism. And we're stumbling in this fog of, oh, if I just get it right. And we don't even realize that thinking of it as something that I can get right, as stuff, is the problem. Right? And then here's a description of ego: a corpse bloated with the 8 worldly concerns. So the eight worldly concerns: praise and blame, gain and loss, fame and ill repute, and pleasure and suffering. That's pretty much an old list of everything that happens, right? That gets cut up. Like we're cutting through that. We're almost serving that like here's the dessert, right? It's served as the feast of, well, whenever I feel happy, I can offer happiness to awake, but I could also offer sad. What would you like, chocolate or vanilla cake? Whenever I feel pain or pleasure, strawberry or rhubarb pie? Do you want it bitter? Do you want it sweet? Right? It's all like all of those experiences are available for awake instead of getting caught in preferring one. And I prefer strawberry to rhubarb. And I'd like vanilla cake with chocolate icing, please. I have preferences, but they're just preferences, right? It's not permanent, right? So they're served up as the feast of awakening, of great bliss. Is not this your doing, O Karma Pakshi? Although I live in the slime and muck, here's I really need it, of the dark age, I still aspire to see your face. Seeing your face is like waking up. There's a very old expression in Zen Buddhism that enlightenment is like seeing the face you had before you were born, or your unborn face, or seeing your true face. They're all expressions of the same thing. And this is the true face of being awake. Although I stumble in the thick black fog of materialism, I still aspire to see your face. The repetition of the sadhana, this is a training, right? And so each time you say it, you're letting it go in a little bit deeper, a little bit different. It's both poetic and it's like working with, like, oh, this is how we, as humans, ordinary people, this is how we take it in. And now we go to a little bit of praise for this awake being. In the boundless space of non meditation, he who performs the great dance of Mahamudra, which is Dorje Trullo Karma Pakshi, puts a stop to all thoughts. Oh, I'm going to take this back. So if you remember in the visualization, there is this image. I'm going to stop the share here for a second and go back to uh, the image of Dorje Trullo Karma Pakshi. Right? There's this image of Dorje Trullo Karma Pakshi, and we talked about it as if this body is made out of light, like a hologram. There's an old Tibetan expression that they would talk about it like a silk tent lit up at night, where you can see sort of the shimmering outside of it, but you know it's not solid, right? They didn't have holograms, so that was their expression for it, right? Inside of this body of light, at the top of his head, like right inside, if you could look through it, if it was light instead of a two-dimensional image, there would be another small Buddha figure, like inside the center of the top of his head. And that is the first Karmapa, Tusam Kempa. And inside of his throat is another small figure, and that's the, I believe, fifth karma. I always get the numbers confused. So that's Mikyo Dorje. And inside of his heart is Rangjung Dorje. So I think this is the fifth karmapa and the eighth karmapa at his throat and his heart. But please allow me to get the numbers wrong. Right? And this person at his forehead, this little being inside of him, is dressed in the robes of a monk and seated on the back of an elephant. And this one at his and is regular human colored, right? Whatever that means to you. And then this one at his throat is orange, dressed like a northern Indian prince from the 5th century BC. So sort of jewels and ornaments and, holding a sword and a vase of treasure. And he's seated on the back of a lion, a snow lion, I think. And then the one in the center is blue, like midnight blue, naked, right? And just sort of floating in the air, right? So we're now talking about the inner reality of like more about deeper look into what it means to be awake. So now we're going to go back to the sadhana so that there's some sense of um, what we're talking about. And you might see this is why this is called a training. This takes a long time to sort of work through this and work your way through it and get like, good at it, right? So in the boundless space of non-meditation, we're going to talk about the figure at the top of the head, Tusum Khyempa. He who performs the great dance of Mahamudra puts a stop to thoughts so that all acts become the acts of the Guru. Is not this your doing, O Tusum Khyempa? So when you stop overthinking, putting a stop to thoughts, and you're just resting in being awake, then whatever you do, hopefully, is expressing the awake. Right? Although I live in the slime and muck of the dark age, I still aspire to see your face. I'd like to have that experience of not overthinking, just doing what needs to be done next as the expression of awake. Although I stumble in the thick black fog of materialism, I'd like, I can let go of somebody going, good job. It's kind of a materialistic approach to this, and just do it. I still aspire to see your face. Now we do the next one, the one in the throat. When the current of thoughts is self-liberated and the essence of Dharma is known, everything is understood and apparent phenomena are all the books one needs. For those of you who did meditation is freedom, this is where flowing and resting go. Stages 8 and 9. The current is self-liberated. It's just flowing, right? The essence of the teaching is just, it expresses itself. And whatever comes up, that's what you're working with. Is not this you're doing, O Mikyo Dorje? That's the, I believe, fifth Karmapa, the orange one with the sword and the treasure vase on the back of the lion. Although I live in the slime and the muck of the dark age, I still aspire to see your face. Tiger, it might be. I can't remember what being it's on. Although I stumble in the thick black fog of materialism, I still aspire to see your face. And then here we are with the third one, right? The one at the heart center. The kingdom of no dharma. So there is a place when you've realized, oh, all these words are just fingers pointing at the moon, where you relax with the words, you get beyond concepts, and you discover a place where there's no journey along the road. You're just resting in what it's like to be awake. That resting in what it's like to be awake is called the naked state, which is why Rangjung Dorje is visualized as naked. It's not erotic, it's a statement of there's no elaboration, he's just awake. The kingdom of no dharma, free from concepts, is discovered within the heart. Here there is no hierarchy of different stages, and the mind returns to its naked state. Is not this your doing, O Rangjung Dorje? Although I live in the slime and muck of the dark age, I still aspire to see your face. Although I stumble in the thick black fog of materialism, I still aspire to see your face. The Father Guru, the embodiment of all meditation, meditative accomplishments, the embodiment of all the siddhas, is all-seeing and all-pervading. And then this is wherever you look, that's whatever you're seeing, that's the body of awake. His transparent body is there. And the power of his blessing can never be diminished. Although I live in the slime and muck of the dark age, I still aspire to see his face. Although I stumble on the thick black fog of materialism, I still aspire to see his face. Living as I do in the dark age, I am calling upon you because I am trapped. This is like, I really need your help. I deserve your help. In this prison without refuge or protector, no one wins at samsara. The age of the three poisons has dawned. Passion, aggression, and ignorance, and the three lords of materialism have seized power. We're consumed by the materialism of owning stuff, of regarding our emotions, thoughts, and memories as real, and spirituality as something that we can own. Right? This is the time of hell on earth. Sadness is always with us, and unceasing depression fills our minds. When I first read this, I was reading through, I was like, is this what they want me to be? No. This is a description of what we're trying to get out of. And we want to, present to this imagined version of awake mind. I really want to be free of this, right? And I understand how sticky holding onto the rock can be. The search for an external protector has met with no success. The idea of a deity as an external being has deceived us, led us astray. Counting on friends has brought nothing but sorrow and insecurity. So now I have no other refuge but you, and then this is our imagined embodiment of awake, Karma Pakshi, the lotus born. I think you can spend a long time thinking about this paragraph of how much we think that something outside of us, whether it's God or whoever's being elected to the highest office, or our partner, or our children, or our favorite, companion animal, or anything else will protect us, right? The idea of a deity filling your God. For some of it's our car, for some of us it's the big guy in the sky, right? That has led us astray. It's deceived us. Even your friends, right? They can't go with you to awake. They can't go with you when you die, right? There's no other refuge but this idea of awake. Interestingly, I find that when I can rest in being awake, not only am I more friendly, but I seem to have more friends. It's not a strategy, but it does seem to be the result that the more open hearted you are, the more life can touch you in a way that responds to that. So it's not saying you don't want to have friends, it's just saying your friends will not save you from samsara. Right? Think of us, poor miserable wretches. We really need your help. With deep devotion and intense longing, I supplicate you. The time has come, and so this is now like Dorje Trollo, Karma Pakshi, you were bodhisattvas, you promised to help beings in need, right? This is the time. The time has come for you to arouse yourself and do something. The tradition of meditation is waning, and intellectual arguments predominate. We are drunk with spiritual pride and seduced by passion. The Dharma is used for personal gain, and the river of materialism has burst its banks. The materialistic outlook dominates everywhere, and the mind is intoxicated with worldly concerns. Under such circumstances, how can you abandon us? The time has come when your child needs you. No material offering will please you, partly because this is a made-up image, and partly because it's not about material, right? So the only offering I can make is to follow your example. I really want your help, and what I have to bring to the party, right, is my willingness to be awake, to travel the road between confused and awake. When the wild and wrathful father approaches, the I think we'll uh, I think we'll stop there, um, because that's plenty, and maybe next week we can pick it up with the celebration of what it's like to identify with awake. So with that, I'm going to stop the share and stop the recording.